Welcome to the Sourcing Hero podcast, produced by Una, a group purchasing organization that empowers sourcing heroes, and Art of Procurement, the world's largest procurement podcast network. I'm your host, Kelly Barnard. The goal of the Sourcing Hero podcast is to capture the epic stories of people who are rising up and beating the odds to create exceptional value within procurement, directly from those heroes themselves. Today, my guest here on the Sourcing Hero podcast is Shawn Edgington. Shawn is the founder and CEO of CoverEase, a digital insurance brokerage that is transforming the way businesses shop for and purchase insurance, as well as group benefits by providing complete transparency to pricing from 15 of the top insurance carriers in the country. Hi, Shawn. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Kelly. Thanks for having me.
No, I shared a little bit very broadly about what CoverEase does, but for people that are listening in that haven't previously met you, what should they know about your professional journey to this point?
Such a good question, and you did an awesome job. Thank you. I would add that more on a personal note, because I think that all connects to my professional career, is that I'm a published author, and it was all around safety and security for our youth online on the internet and with social media. I'm an amateur interior design addict.
Ooh.
So I have a construction background. So I leverage that in my professional career as well. I have a passion for simplifying the complicated, and I think that's really how CoverEase came about, because purchasing insurance, assessing your insurance program, it's complicated, complex, and it takes a lot of time. And I really wanted to figure out a way to make that simple, leveraging technology. I'm a mom and a wife, of course, and I founded a nonprofit called the Great American Noble Challenge. And that kind of came off of the book that I wrote. And I think that's really important because No Bull inspired teens to use their personal experiences combined with like the power of filmmaking and social media to create change around important issues that we see today all over the news, like bullying, violence, drug and alcohol abuse. We have the fentanyl problems going on, suicide and inequality. With our organization, because of the fact that we used film to tell short stories and public service announcements, and then we spread those awareness films and PSAs through social media, we were able to just affect millions of teens across the globe. We hit like 100 countries. So, and I think what I did is I took my loss control and safety background and figure out how can I, kind of direct this more towards the teens that really need the support and the help at that young age. At those starts at 13 now, 13, all the way up into the 20s. So, and I also want to say that was actually one of the hardest things I ever did, was run a nonprofit. If there's anyone listening to this today and you're part of a nonprofit, I bow down to them. I bow down to you, because I've run my company for many years, but running a nonprofit is different and so difficult. So great job.
No, it absolutely is. And it's a complicated world, sort of with its own set of rules and way things work. And in fact, I have a close friend. She actually does web development work for me. And she was recently explaining to me something I never would have guessed, that accepting donations from different states requires you to file different paperwork in all of the states where you receive donations. So even something as simple as people all over the place wanting to help, which we think of as sort of being an advantage of reaching people through social media and virtual connections, comes with its own complexities. And so there is no such thing as a simple solution to anything worth doing, it would seem.
No, unfortunately not. And you would think that technology with Venmo and PayPal and all those types of, digital currency transfers would allow that to be easier. But you're right. It still is the background and the paperwork that still needs to be processed for nonprofits, especially.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if it seems overwhelming to you, given the fact that you have experience in the insurance industry. That's definitely a little bit of a bad sign for how all of that administrative stuff works. Now, you're actually the first insurance industry expert we've had on the Sourcing Heroes. So, congrats on that front. And I know that listeners love sort of general state of the state, general overview type of information. So, can you sort of start us off with just a very high level overview of, what's sort of the focus of or trends that are prevailing in the insurance industry right now?
Yeah, I would say I'd like to focus on one of the biggest trends right now, which is cyber liability and the exposure of cyber liability for corporate America. In the face of our current cyber climate, we have ransomware attacks, we have cyber schemes that are changing every day. Our companies, my company, your company, everyone listening, we are all we're all experiencing an increased cyber risk, and it's just causing the market to harden and prices to increase. And so, in procurement, I'm sure we have some people that are procuring services,
Yeah.
including insurance, and we are seeing, prices double, triple, depending on the size of the company. So we're seeing in the small business marketplace, we're seeing, 50 to 200% premium increases.
Wow.
And while the mid-sized to like the large sized companies, they're experiencing spend increases over 50%. And then on top of that, not only are we, experiencing these pricing increases, but we're also experiencing increased increased deductibles, retentions, decreased policy limits and coverages, and then new mandates for all these internal security controls, such as, for instance, I just went through my renewal about 45 days ago, and my premium increased for my company about 250%, and not because of my any losses ever, nothing, but really just because of the state of the industry. Also, needed to make sure, which we already had in place, we have, like most companies probably do also on this call, multi-factor authentication
Hmm.
is a huge thing, and you're probably seeing that happen, around all of the platforms that you're using today. For instance, one of our platforms, Salesforce, a lot of companies use Salesforce, our AMS system, are, any of those like DocuSign, all of them now are having, a third party MFA now, where we're not only multi-factoring on our systems, but also on the exterior systems that are cloud based. So, and then also, for instance, companies need to have their incident response plan in place and in practice. They need to have real-time data backups, hopefully redundant backups, redundant servers, and then also endpoint protection. That is really quite challenging. We just launched ours for our endpoint protection. And for those of you that don't know what that means, is that you have to make sure that you're protecting not only your, your workstations, your laptops, your mobile devices, but everyone else is in the whole company. So you figure many people have 3 different systems. So 3 times the amount of employees and the number of endpoints that need to be protected. So it's quite challenging, and all those things need to be done to really get the best pricing you can get on your cyber coverage. Um, but the great news is that there are a few insurtechs that are really doing a great job getting making available real time underwriting and real time quoting for your company, for my company, for all of our companies in the US. And what they're doing is they're leveraging APIs to score businesses' risk, and it's happening in a matter of minutes. And they're using, over 1,200 APIs, bouncing off all
Wow.
the information that's available publicly, dark web, and so on, to score your company and present pricing. And I think that's just a huge benefit for all of us as technology. Obviously, we're looking at ways that technology is exposing us, but also it's benefiting us in ways too. And also leveraging the AI, AI is reducing the underwriting timelines, from weeks to months to sometimes days and even minutes. That's huge. Time is money.
Oh,
And then
sure.
and it's all really depending on the complexity of the customer and the limits of coverage needed. So, I mean, technology is our best friend, and it
Yeah.
also can be our enemy, and that's I really wanted to talk about that cover right now because it's an important one, and a lot of companies are underinsured or they're uninsured. So just and they don't really understand the risk that they have today.
Well, and that's an interesting point. It's a follow-up question I was going to ask you. We spent a lot of time talking about digital,
Yep,
almost to the point where you don't need to say the word digital anymore because
yep.
pretty much anything that we're doing shy of manufacturing, and even that has a digital component to it. I wonder what your thoughts are on given the dependence on digital and the prevalence of cyber risk based on what you shared. Why don't we better understand cyber risk?
Well, I would say that it's complicated, really complicated. Um, Cyber incidents were primarily, we saw in the past, they were data breaches and they were targeted large companies. Like remember the Target breach? It was a
Oh,
huge
yes.
Target breach. And they weren't in our daily headlines. And I think then, I mean, just several years ago, we thought it's never going to happen to us. And we weren't really as dependent as we are today on digital. Fast forward, we all know COVID changed really everything the
Yes.
way many of us operate today. And it really expedited everything really going digital. As an example, unfortunately, a good example, I attended a funeral service this morning. And 3 years ago, were we able to attend a funeral service, that was happening in Ohio through a virtual service where churches online? They were not. COVID really had to get most churches online so that we could attend service. We could attend a funeral of a loved one that we couldn't get to in time. And I would
It's
say that, yeah, yeah, I would just say that it's it's really we're just experiencing all of us are experiencing just a increased risk because we're all so much more reliant on digital, right? So our risk is dependent on how reliant we are, and when those systems go down or we can't access or our data is held for ransom, what are our next steps? How do we work? How does our business continue to operate? Like you said, supply chain, communications, everything is digital.
yeah. Well, and it's interesting you bring up the example of Target. That's a perfect example for this audience because if I'm remembering correctly, the breach was actually with the supplier that
Yep.
manages this is so bad. I don't know what this thing is called. The little thing at the register where you put in your credit card and pay,
Yeah.
whatever that's called. It was the supplier of that thing, which now, especially you mentioned COVID, every supermarket, every home improvement store, every retailer has this little thing that whether you're doing self checkout or not, you go through this little credit card authentication box. And it was the supplier of the software running through that box that actually had the data breach. But I don't remember the name of that supplier. It was probably in the news story at the time. I think of it as the Target data breach
You're right.
and brand value or brand reputation is probably a better way to put it, is
Yes.
an excellent example of a cost or a loss that can be associated with a risk that materializes. What are some other costs or downsides or negative impacts that can potentially accompany cyber risk that comes to fruition?
Well, I would say definitely your reputation. You need to be able to, when you have a breach, you really need to be able to respond, and you need those security experts at your fingertips that can help, you know, get immediately help you with whatever it is. Is it a ransom attack? Is it your, you know, every possible scenario, that third party situation that you mentioned. I mean, Target was down for quite a while as far as getting their payment procurement
Yes.
back up, right? And that was a third party exposure. So it happened to Target, but really it was a result of that third party that that basically it cost loss of income. So Target had a loss of income because they couldn't accept the payment when they were down. That affected even online, right? So it went to online. You couldn't buy anything online because it was the same payment resource
That's right.
that you were buying online. Again, reputation. And then you have to notify all of your customers that you had a breach, and that is expensive.
Ugh.
Um, I mean, the list is long, Kelly.
And of
It could
course we would,
it could even be bodily injury, property
yes.
damage.
Yep.
You could have had it could be a situation where a data breach or a loss of operations is going to cause physical damage in a manufacturing company.
True.
We had a very big workers' comp claim as a result of a very large piece of equipment that went down and caused you know a horrendous injury to two employees that were operating that machinery. And it just trickles down to every single thing within an operation. That's almost anything that's plugged in, right?
Which is everything.
Yep.
Absolutely everything. Now, when you think about, so we've talked about the complexity of so many things being digital, and we've talked about the complexity of what can happen to a business if a cyber risk comes to pass. Does that also mean that it's correspondingly complicated to look at the different options available around cyber liability and exposure insurance?
Well, yeah, that's such a great question. I would say that um, coverage is highly complex, and it's very unique and needs to be customized. Your program needs to be customized to your risk and to your profile, your business profile. So the first thing I think that anyone on this call needs to do is really educate themselves on um, where their risk is, where their threats are, where their potential financial impacts um, are, and then work on get those top 10 things, and then work on designing a custom solution that fits your company's needs. Um, and there's great ways to do that. I really love cyber insurance for dummies. And trust me, I know no one on this call is a dummy. But when it comes to cyber insurance,
Yeah.
80% of my industry, the insurance brokers that should absolutely know this cover, are also lacking in knowledge. So read it. It's free. You can reach out to me. It's a great resource. It outlines the basics. And if anyone on the call would like a free copy, they're welcome to reach out to me directly, or they can go to Cowbell Cyber, and they can, under resources on the nav bar, they can download a free copy there. It's worth the read. It sounds silly, but it's worth the read. And it's worth mentioning too that work with a broker that again does know cyber very well. They're well versed in the coverage line, and select a carrier that has broad forms, that they are training your employees. They have those resources, because one of the biggest exposures as a company, one of our hugest exposures, is the fact that our employees are letting in 95% of these breaches through
Wow.
accidentally clicking on something. So training is important, and it needs to be, I do my training here 4 times a year. It needs to be top of mind. And carriers are now offering this coverage included in their program. Also, I would say continuous risk assessment after coverage is placed is really an important piece of cyber coverage. And carriers now, especially the insurtechs, there's a couple out there that are offering, they have security experts that are working, they're connected to your account, and they're making recommendations to help mitigate risk. And then hopefully at the end of the year, you have lower premiums because risk was mitigated throughout the policy term. So there's all those types of newfangled things that are happening thanks to technology.
And I would just like to circle back. I completely agree with you. There is so much value in the Dummies series of books. I own several. You mentioned interior design earlier. I'm not even qualified to read a book. If there is an interior design for dummies, I shouldn't even open it. I'm so, so far away from that area. But we do all need to understand the fundamental things in every area that overlap with our work where we probably don't have any background. And I wholeheartedly endorse that whole series of books. I think they're absolutely fantastic. They're actionable, right? They give you just what you need to get going. So Shawn, as we come to the end of our time, I want to take you through the tradition here on the Sourcing Hero podcast. So you have two choices. I'm going to give you two questions and you can answer whichever one of these you like. There are no wrong answers. In keeping with our discussion, there are no dumb answers. We've had thoughts from all the way across the spectrum, and every single one has been fantastic. So here are your options. The first one is, what does the idea of a sourcing hero mean to you? And the second one is, what do you think heroism looks like in a business context?
So I'm going to go with door number 2, if that's okay.
Of course.
And I know that your podcast is the Hero Broadcast, and I spent a lot of time trying to pick a hero. And it was difficult for me to actually pick a hero that was not like personally related to me, or, someone that was much bigger, and it wasn't an action hero like, Superman or Spider-Man. So what I did is I thought, okay, within my day-to-day operations of my company, I thought that's where I was going to start. Like my hero, because we all work all day long in offices with people that we trust, hopefully. So my hero is trustworthy, they're dependable, they're compassionate, they're transparent, and they put my concerns in front of theirs. My hero is always willing to tackle the difficult situations and thinks outside of the box. I just think that is so important. And they can resolve problems and tackle complex situations that arise and use that out of the box thinking to really tackle that. My hero gets great results and is great to work with. And I'd say also my hero is someone who I want to spend time with even. Like I think they're a good person. That's my hero.
I think that's a great description. And actually, given what I know about the listening audience of the Sourcing Hero, I think there are a number of people in the listening audience that actually fit that description very well. So back it up and listen to that again if you need to, because I think Shawn's description actually describes a lot of the people that regularly tune in to hear these conversations. Shawn, if people have listened to what you've shared today, we are definitely sharing some of your writing right on the show notes of this episode. So check that out if you want to learn more. But if people want to get in touch with you directly, what is the best way or place for them to find you?
They can go to LinkedIn. They can email me at sedgington@coverease.com. There is 2 G's in Edgington. Everyone gets that wrong. So you can call me, text me. This is a virtual world we're living in. You can Teams me. You can Zoom me. Just kidding.
Excellent. Well, thank you for making yourself so accessible. Thank you for sharing your expertise and your point of view with us today. And thank you most of all for being a guest here on the Sourcing Hero podcast.
It was my pleasure, Kelly. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Sourcing Hero podcast. Join us again next time for more true stories of sourcing and business heroism performed by your colleagues and peers. Look for the Sourcing Hero wherever you get your podcasts, and don't forget to subscribe. Finally, don't forget, sourcing heroism is taking place all around us every day. Keep your eyes open and you're bound to see it. Until next time, I'm your host, Kelly Barner. Stay well and always remember that you can be a hero too.